The best part of this lifestyle, growing cranberries, is the freedom out here on the farm, working alongside your family members and the same crew that you grow up with. I'm working alongside the people that have taught me since I was 10 years old how to do things.
You gotta love living out here. It's beautiful. It's just a really nice atmosphere to kind of grow up, live in. I don't think I could live in town ever again.
It's where I've grown up my whole life. I spent my whole life right here on the farm. I lived in 3 houses and I could throw a stone between all 3 of them. As a kid, you know, there was always stuff to get into or play in or get in trouble doing. And so yeah, I've always enjoyed living here and being around the family all the time. So in the wintertime, to protect the plant, because it's a perennial plant, we have to protect it with ice or encase it in ice. And then part of the cultural practice is to put a layer of sand over the plants on a 3 to 4 year rotation.
It keeps from overgrowth and gives fresh nutrients to the berries and the vines for the upcoming season.
The sand that we use for sanding is typically on our property. We dig it out of the ground and stockpile it, and that's what we're using to sand.
When the spring of the year, when the ice melts, the sand goes down and filters down onto the plants, and it covers up some of the old growth, and a lot of the insect pests that we have live in the duff or the soil layer, and we're burying them by covering them up with sand. And it also keeps the bed warmer. We can have a cold night and you can have 2 beds side by side, one that you sanded and one that hasn't been sanded for a few years. And you can have a 10-degree difference on a cold night.
Depending on the sanding, the type of sanding that we're doing, whether it be a new planting or a really heavy overgrowth planting, depends kind of on how much sand we would apply, between a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Everyone has their own preference on what the right answer is, but depending on what we're doing, it's usually about 3/4 of an inch of sand every 3 to 5 years, ideally, if you can.
So during the springtime, we're getting ready to put in our irrigation systems back online and getting ready for the growing season.
The water reservoirs that we have are all on the farm right next to the growing area, and a lot of them are uphill of the beds, so we can gravity feed if we were putting on a flood. Usually cranberries have about 7 to 1 acres of support land per planted acre of cranberry, so there's a lot of water around here.
That's probably first on the agenda, get all the sprinklers up and running so we're ready by the end of April, first part of May, because we can have frost that early, and if the plants take off and start growing, we have to be ready to frost protect. So that's first on the agenda in the spring, but at the same time, if we're renovating beds, we're getting beds prepared that we've hauled sand on during the winter and getting those set up.
A renovation of an older bed or a variety that isn't producing like we would want. The planting is with vines usually that we've mowed ourselves from another existing bed, usually a more desirable variety for yield or keeping quality or fruit size. And we can also buy those vines from another grower. The universities are developing new varieties.
In the last 10 or 15 years, there have been a lot of new hybrids that have been developed. And the production can be anywhere from 3 to 4 times what old varieties are.
Basically all you do is sprinkle vines on top of the sand, and we disc them in, and they take off from there.
We have a planter that we made in-house, and it lays a layer of vines right on the sand. And there's also a few guys walking behind to get clumps of vines out.
We don't start harvesting them typically 3 to 5 years. We need to get a strong root system, and especially since we do fresh fruit and we are basically combing the vines with our pickers, we need to have a strong root system so that we're not just ripping them out of the ground.
Even though it's very expensive to renovate a bed, there's a lot of reasons why you do it. Just mainly better production and better attributes that certain new varieties have that the old varieties did not have. You're putting in hybrid vines that you're usually buying, which are expensive. You might even be paying royalties to use them, but hopefully you're using a variety that the production is going to more than pay for the cost of the renovations.
Usually around June when the blossom occurs, and that's when we bring in pollinators. The role that bees play is huge. Without them, I don't know what we would do.
When the pollinators are out there, you can just walk out in the bed and you absolutely hear them. I mean, they're everywhere and they do one heck of a good job. They collect pollen on their legs, and as they travel through the canopy of the vines, they distribute that pollen, and that's plant science.
It's a supplement. It's either honeybees or bumblebees are the two main pollinating insects that are brought in. And you're just basically ensuring that you're going to have a decent crop. There's some people that rely on just wild insects. By bringing in honeybees, I guess we're just ensuring that we're going to get good coverage over the 2 or 3 weeks that they're in bloom, even though that's expensive to bring in the colonies. It's kind of an insurance policy.
Following the bloom or the blossom period, there's actually a fruit set where the little small green cranberries will start to come on, and that is when we'll start fertilizing the crop. As they size up throughout the summer months, they'll start to get a hue of red, and they're about full size then. For me, harvest season is probably my favorite time of the year, despite all the long days and hours. We all work together as a family to get it done. We usually hire on a lot more people. It's our busiest time of year, but for harvest for me, I'm out on the marsh. I run the picking machine and experiencing it all right in front of me.
Harvest for fresh fruit is a little more intense than for the process. Guys that are doing it, you have to have a lot of faith in them because they can make or break the quality just the way they're harvesting. They can't go too fast. They have to go in and pick them. They're being gentle and trying not to rip them off of the plants. You got to get their speed down just right, and they're under the gun to cover so much acreage in a given day because we know we have to get done before it gets cold, and so we know we've got about an 8-week window to get as much done as we can.
Our harvest style is fresh fruit picking with pickers and boats. We're not processing for a conventional style of growing cranberries. It's a modernized method of hand picking for fresh fruit sales. It's a lot slower and tedious process. It's a lot more delicate. As we harvest, we're slowly raking the cranberries up and putting them in a boat. The harvest process is quite a bit differently in that aspect.
It's 7-8 weeks of nose to the stone. You're dealing with weather, and again, you're dealing with help and breakdowns. And the first couple days are good, and then after that, it just gets to be a routine that they go and they start at sunrise and they go till sundown.
The harvest season for me, I operate the drying room. They bring them up, they load dump trucks with the berries, and that's where my day starts. I'm in the drying, and I dry all day. It starts out, we separate the berries from all the grass, any leaves, any debris. We spray them with a Sanidate, basically just an organic peroxide that will kill any bacteria on the berries, and then they go up an elevator onto a large propane heated dryer.
You gotta use a certain amount of heat. You don't wanna get them too hot because you'll cook them, so you're constantly watching your temperature and making sure there's gravity flowing through the system at a constant speed. You don't want them wet, but you don't want them too hot either.
From there, they go through the wall into the cooler and binned and stored in cold storage. It's a massive building. Just an industrial cooler. It's floor to ceiling with fruit all the way to the back.
We're an Ocean Spray grower, so Ocean Spray pretty much manages our sales, and we package them as needed. They call us and tell us every day we're in contact, what number of cases of what size. They come down and then they go through an electronic sorter, which has got color cameras and lasers, and that, again, they get a final inspection, and then they'll go across a hand inspection where there's a table with some people lined up, and then they get elevated and they come up and go through a packaging machine.
We put them in many different size bags and languages to be shipped all over the country and the world.